All right, good afternoon, and welcome back for another panel. So, this panel is on co-creating sustainability across the value chain, and I have the great pleasure to introduce four outstanding panelists for our conversation this afternoon. So, to my left is Florence Bulté. She's Chief Sustainability Officer at Chalhoub Group. David Grall, VP Sustainability and Corporate Transformation at the Nexans Group. Michele Lacroix, Group Head of Sustainability at SCOR. And all the way to your right is Fabien, Chêne, Head of Sustainability Business Europe at Schneider Electric. So my name's Halbheer. I'm going to have a discussion with our guests on several topics, but I would like to open with the bigger, picture on sustainability. Now, I remember when I spoke to Michele, on the prep course, like, to me, there's an equation: sustainability is equal to ESG, and I kind of remember your face going a little, And maybe you can start to say how you see the differences between the two frameworks, and then we can start to work on sustainability.
Sure, thank you, Daniel, and thanks for having me here. When it comes to sustainability, it's been years that I have kicked off my journey on this from a professional standpoint. We started to talk about ESG, which is basically environmental, social, and governance. It has moved progressively to sustainability, which is a testimony of a higher degree of maturity. E, S, and G are only factors, drivers. Who would talk about not a chief financial officer, but a chief balance sheet and revenue officer? Nobody. So environment, social, and governance, these are factors. This being said, it can be seen from different lenses. Two lenses that is called the double materiality from the regulatory standpoint. But these two lenses are two sides of the same coin. One lens is considering environmental, social, and governance aspects on how they can impact the business model of a company. If you are, an industrial company with plants on coastal villages, it may be that increase in sea rising could hamper the profitability of your business. It can also be that you are caught for not respecting human rights, and then you are sued, and it has also a negative impact on your business. Or it can also be, and have a look to Tesla or to Facebook, that because of internal governance, the volatility of the shares of your company is higher than what it could be. This is what is called the outside-in effect of environmental, social, and governance aspect. And it's linked to the financial materiality that is brought in the company because of those aspects. It's one side of the coin. The other one is what is called the inside out, which has more to do with what we call impact or impact materiality. And it's basically how the way you operate has positive or negative impact on environment and societies. And sustainability is about both sides of this coin. So you have to consider outside in as much as inside out effect, understanding that you should only act on what matters, either from a financial standpoint or from an impact standpoint. Never lose time in addressing environmental, social, or governance drivers that have no impact, on which you can have no impact, neither on environment or societies. What would be the world if us, as a reinsurance company, strongly involved in protecting against natural catastrophes, would say we intend to act against poverty in the world? And at the same time, Nestlé or Danone says, we want to be first in fighting against climate change. It would not be efficient. So we really need not only to consider sustainability, but to make sure that we address what is material from both sides of this coin.
Well, thank you. So picking up on sustainability, like for you, Fabien, Schneider, how do you see your impact, you know, this kind of inside-out view on the world, and can you maybe give some examples on how you tackle sustainability at Schneider?
Sure. Well, thanks for this question, Danielle, and hello to everyone. First of all, what just Michele said is a kind reminder of CSRD, that we are all in, and it starts with double materiality, so really understanding all of the impacts that we as a company have on the environment is definitely key. Story short, sustainability at Schneider Electric. I don't want to sound like déjà vu, but we've been working hard in Schneider Electric when it comes to sustainability, and thanks to the vision that our CEO had more than 10 years ago, is to really put sustainability at the heart of the strategy of the company in terms of DNA and what we strive for. And we've learned a lot over the years, but I think that we can still do even more. So how does that translate, to answer to your question? From a sustainability standpoint and the different objectives that we have. Basically, we did our last strategy / I would call it sustainability plan back in 2021, and we voted ourselves, of course, different ESG objectives to reach by 2025, so 4 years time frame, aligned with the UN SDG goals. And I want to give you, I'm not going to list all of the different KPIs that we have, but I think I'm going to comment maybe 3 that I believe highlights in a practical manner what we strive for. The first one is on behalf of our customers, which some of you are here today from a sustainability standpoint. By 2025, on a baseline of 2018, we want to help our customers save and avoid 800 million tons of CO2. We have a dedicated methodology, a dedicated approach to calculate that, and by end of 2023, we were roughly more than half of these emissions saved and avoided. And this is something that we track on a quarterly basis that is in link with what we called our ESG barometer, or should I call it our Schneider Sustainability Impact, which is called SSI. So that's the first one. The second one, which was, I believe, a bold commitment from Schneider at the time, so it was now 2 years ago, we said by 2025, we will divide by 2 the emissions of our top 1,000 suppliers. Quite frankly, when we announced it, I don't think we had a clue on how we were going to do it. But nevertheless, I think it was really a bold commitment directly from our leadership, from our ExCom, from our CEO. This is the vision, this is the way to go forward, and basically this is what we believe in. We're still in this journey, and I can share maybe further more details afterwards on where we are exactly with that. But nevertheless, a lot of progress has been made to onboard all of our different suppliers. Lastly, today, 2 billion people in the world are without access to electricity, and our goal in Schneider is to make sure that we make this electricity accessible. And so one of the last goals that we have is by 2025, 50 million of people have access to renewable energy. These are the 3 goals. There are others, which translates from a more practical standpoint what we strive to do when it comes to sustainability.
Well, thank you so much. You know, we can dive deeper into some of these topics as we go along. But now, Florence, you work at a family-owned luxury kind of business, and I was just wondering, how does E&S end up in your strategy to begin with?
Thank you. So just to set a bit of context, because we might not be as well known as Schneider, so we are a family-owned business operating in the Middle East for 65 years, retailers and distributors of luxury products. We have we employed 15,000 people. We have over 700 stores and managing 300 brands. So on the E&S, I mean, Michele, you answered well and completely adhere with your vision on things. but how does it translate on a daily basis in our company? So for us, the turning point, being a family business in a retail industry, in the luxury industry, not at all regulated, in a market which is not at all regulated, it's completely our own motivation and the vision of our group president to embark into a sustainability journey. The turning point was in 2014, when we became a member of the United Nations Global Compact, and at that time the obligation of reporting accelerated our effort in that domain. So we're looking at people, partners and planet. So just want to start by people, as you started by the environmental side. So for us, we're looking at different subjects, and as again, Michele, you were saying, very important to make sure it's relevant to our business, to our environment, and subject that we can control, and where we can make a difference. So we're looking at gender parity. So just to give an example, looking at increasing the number of women in senior position in the company. So we have an objective at 33%, which is way above the benchmark of the region. For that, we have programs which is also preparing women in middle leadership to accede to this senior position role. So we have women in leadership role that support cohorts of women every year to achieve that. We're looking at integration of people of determination. And again, this is really relevant for the region because it's a taboo subject in the Middle East. People of determination are not integrated in the business world. So we make it our mission as well to do that and to make our warehouse, our stores, our headquarters accessible. So just as an example, we equipped 400 of our stores in the region with hearing loops just this year. We're looking at youth empowerment, again, very important because there's 28% of youth unemployment in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And when we know what it can trigger, it's extremely important to work on that. So we do it through a sharing of knowledge, partnerships with universities or even primary school, I mean at any level, sharing of knowledge, support of scholarships, and of course, which triggers recruitment of talent as well. So it's a win-win situation. And we also looking at building a culture of diversity and inclusion because we have more than 100 nationalities in the group. So we are diverse, I would say, by nature, but when it comes to inclusion, that's where the culture, building a culture is extremely important. If I go to the partner pillar quickly, so the idea is to make sure all the partners and suppliers and brands we're working with are doing a responsible business. So we have different tools. I will just mention one, which is our supplier scorecard, based on the principle of the 10 principles of the UNGC. So we're looking at how do they do in human rights, labor rights, protection of the environment, anti-corruption, transparency. Mm-hmm. And again, we have the objective of having these suppliers committing to this, answering the scorecard. But more than that, it's really to open a dialogue and to raise the level of awareness, which is, again, is very important when you speak of the Middle Eastern region. Last but not least pillar is the planet pillar. Where we paving the way to our net zero commitment. So I will develop it later. But we are looking at an acceleration, of course, of our decarbonization strategy that we started in 2014. And the second point of focus is contribution to circularity in our operations, but also in our business model. So again, I will develop it later, but how can we leverage what we do with our brands and how can we develop business models on the side of these brands which are circular?
You see, so we have like people working on the environment people, same for you. And now, David, I have a slide here for you, and you're going to explain how you integrate economics into this kind of equation at Nexans.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and hi, everyone. In fact, both Fabien, Michele, You said everything, almost everything. And what happened at Nexans is, in fact, how we can modelize all these three pillars in order to formalize it and be sure that it is cascade from the business group, business unit, and the site perspective. Because we can decide whatever we want at top level. If the site, and we are an industrial company, we are cable manufacturer. You said, Fabien, that you have to grant access to 2 billion people. We are partner to grant this access because you are providing accessories, all the infrastructure. We are providing cables. Unfortunately, cable are made of copper, bauxite, which is alumina and aluminum. And when it comes to copper and bauxite, it comes to mining. And minings are one of the key focus points of the human rights, environmental, as well as financial. And so Christopher Guérin, our CEO, made the introduction speech of the 2024 promotion at HEC back in late August. And what he said regarding the operating model that Nexans is monitoring and driving is how we can combine the three pillars, so environment, engagement, and economics, all in once, not one in silo, not detrimental to each other. And the idea is this is what you have in the slide in front of you, meaning that how we can operate from a financial standpoint. So on this one, this is the first pillar. He has decided back in 2018 that no volume growth. We stay at 8 billion revenue from 2018 to 2023. But we double our profitability. The reason is that how we can reduce our impact on the environment while increase our profitability. And this is what we did with the E3 model, meaning that we try to formalize in an equation. We all do math here, or finance at least, and we have tried to financialize the non-financial performance, meaning that if you want to set the discipline that finance is able to do all the history long, we have to put that in an equation that comes to environment, economy, and engagement. And we will have some example, I think, later on regarding the engagement, or we can measure or assess the engagement. But it's key because we are working with a lot of new generation. And last week, we had the climate certificate of the HEC at Nexans, working on a specific business case in order to ask them how to link these three pillars without any detrimental action to each other. And it's something that could be a little bit surprising to understand, but it works because we are scoring each single site on the three elements. There is, of course, good alumni, bad students, but of course, they have all the toolbox that help them to meet the operating model of Nexans and at least become what we call internally E1, E2, or E3 leaders on these E3 models.
So you see, this is a great thing to see this model integrated, and I think now we can branch off a little bit more into the carbon kind of pillar because we're at the climate day. So maybe Fabien, if you want to say a few words about how you measure and tackle different scope of emissions at Schneider, how does that work in your daily life?
Sure. Maybe just to set the scene from a baseline standpoint, what is the overall carbon footprint of Schneider? Scope 1 and 2, it's relatively low. We're talking about 200 kilotons of CO2. Of course, the majority is both on the upstream and on the downstream. Well, in fact, mainly on the downstream. But let me start first with the downstream. From the upstream, it's 7 million tons roughly of CO2, mainly with our suppliers, so purchased goods and services. And then the 85% is on the downstream, in fact, related to use of sold products. So that's kind of to give you the overall baseline. And we set our carbon pledge back in 2022, aligned with science-based targets initiatives, both near-term and long-term. And how does that translate in the different time frame? Well, we start first with a short-term objective, which is by 2025 on our scope 1 and 2 emissions, so really on our operations. And here it's to be carbon neutral, even though we got to be super careful now on the name, and Michele and I were talking about it earlier on. But also, as I said earlier on, we are focusing already on our upstream emissions to divide by 2 our top 1,000 suppliers. So that's really short-term wise. And then if we project ourselves more on a long-term basis, aligned with Science Based Targets Initiative, by 2030, we will be what we called net zero ready. We won't be able to eliminate completely our emissions. There will be some residual emissions, that's our own scope 1 and 2, and minus 25% across all our value chain, scope 1, 2, and 3. And then more, of course, long-term wise, by 2050, it will definitely be net zero across all of our value chain. So that's kind of the overall, commitments that we have. Our journey started fundamentally more than 10 years ago, so we've learned a lot from it. And today, based on the learnings that we've had and our overall journey, we essentially want to leverage and benefit these learnings and potentially apply it to our customers and also be able to support our customers in their own overall decarbonization journey. And maybe this is something I can comment overall afterwards when we're going to go into further discussions. So that's kind of to set the scene, what our commitments are and where we sit today in terms of carbon footprint reduction.
Yeah, that's great. So you see, carbon is, to me, when I look at it, you always see it as one metric. And I'm like believing in circularity as a solution to multiple environmental problems. It's not only carbon, but you have other metrics like resource use or other things that you can kind of tackle at the same time. So maybe, I don't know, Florence, if you want to say a few words how circularity plays in your industry and what you are working on in this domain.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a major part of our decarbonization journey, and to continue on the same subject. For us, we started in 2014, not by circularity, but just on a decarbonization step. 2021, we thought, okay, we are mature enough to start paving the way to our net zero commitment. So we reached out to Schneider, actually, and for the first time in 2021, we calculated our 3 scopes of emission that we used as a baseline. 2022, so for us the journey is much more recent. 2022, we submitted to SBTi our proposed midterm journey. 2023, our midterm targets were validated. So for us, we have to reduce our scope 1 and 2 by 50% by 2032, and our scope 3 by 30% by 2032. But for us, being a retailer and distributor, 98% of our emissions are linked to the scope 3. So you can imagine the challenge. So of course, I mean, scope 1 and 2, I won't go through it. We all know energy efficiency, mobility, optimization of resources, shifting to renewable energy, etc. The scope 3, what we've started to do again with Schneider last year, a supplier engagement program, when we mapped out the 100 suppliers which were contributing the most to our GHG emission, but at the same time which have not started their journey. And we launched this program this year, so it's about awareness, education, sharing of data, exchange of modelization system, etc. So in this context, circularity is adding and help us accelerate the journey. So aside from in our operation, where again, maybe I won't develop so much because we all know the step of recycling, waste management, etc. that we can take. What is specific to our business, I would say, is develop models, circular business models. So for example, we have a concept called level shoes. So it's luxury handbags and shoes operating in the UAE. 3 years ago, I think we did a market study showing that 66% of our luxury customers were ready to buy pre-loved items. So we decided to build this platform where customers could sell and buy luxury products online. So that's working really well. Another business model that we adopted here in France is with Christophe. So Christophe is buying products, from the flea market that we are refurbishing in our factory in Yainville, and selling them these products under the vintage collection in our stores in Paris and online. And we have other business models, circular business model, like rental of dinnerware from one of our lifestyle store, rental of jewelry with Swarovski, etc. So in the whole context, it's a way we found to accelerate our journey of the decarbonization.
Okay, so we talk circularity. Maybe David, because you were, mentioning mining, you were mentioning, you're selling cables, so you also have an opportunity to work on used cables. Maybe you can explain how this kind of strategic role of circularity is important for you over there.
In fact, for a cable manufacturer, the business is somehow linear. You extract copper, you send the copper cathode to the metallurgy facilities, ours, and this is the unique opportunity we have to have our facility in the metallurgy, and then you start to transform the copper into cable. It's the same for aluminum, but let's talk about copper. And then you transform it and you sell it, sometimes to Rexel, Sonepar, big customers, Schneider as well. And then it's part of the outside and the downstream part of the value chain. Our goal at Nexans is how we can convert this linear industry into a circular economy, meaning that extracting copper today required significant amount of water and significant amount of rock extracted from the mine. If we want to reduce the impact and the footprint on environment, biodiversity, etc., we have to work in an ecosystem, not only Nexans and Schneider, but everyone. The mining company, we could have Orange, we could have RATP, RTE, all the cable user, the end customer, in order to be sure that we can reuse, recycle, and re-inject this copper, or the polymer as well, or the PVC, inside this circular economy. And where it's strategic is that if you have the facility as a metallurgy, and this is a unique opportunity, a unique model that we have for a French company to have this fully integrated from A to Z, it's important to partner with a kind of ecosystem, structure it, in order to be sure that each capabilities, each skill from any single stakeholders are combined in order to be sure that we reduce the impact and the footprint in the upfront phase. The reason is simple. The copper demand will significantly increase in the next 5 years. The demand will completely explode because of the electricity demand. We discussed that prior to this meeting, that by 30 or 40%. If we need to extract the copper that is required to renew first the existing grid in Europe, and keep in mind that the existing grid has been built up back in the 60s or in the 50s, sometimes in London, for example. And if we have to connect and grant access to the 2 billion people, it will explode again and again and again. If we don't reuse what we call the urban mine, meaning that the cable that are already installed in the city, and we don't decommission this urban mine, we will lose the opportunity to recycle something that will create definitely something that easy to use without impact on the biodiversity, on the environment, on all the resources required to produce copper that help us to produce cable. Today, it doesn't make any sense to let the cable install and renew this grid by installing cable without decommissioning the existing copper. So this is where it is strategic, and we can, well, let's be honest, we cannot do by our own. We are partnering, and we will talk about that later, with Schneider already, because when you have experience, you have the capabilities, you have the skill to do that, it's fundamental to structure a partnership, like a kind of ecosystem, where it's virtuous in order to be sure that this circularity, and you can see the illustration of circularity is something that is virtuous circle, can reuse, recycle, upcycle, all this term that we can spend like hours on it, in order to be sure. But for copper, this is how it is strategic for Nexans.
So we have this kind of idea where we started out with carbon. We saw some ideas on circularity, and now when I go back to the climate thing, when we kind of take a bigger perspective with climate change, we have all these sort of physical risks and transition risks, and maybe you can say something about how they impact your business model and the business model of the customers you serve.
So I'm lucky to work at SCOR when it comes to talking about climate change. SCOR is a reinsurance company. I'm not sure if you are familiar with reinsurance, but basically our clients are insurance company looking for transferring part of the risks to someone who has more capital and more risk management capabilities. So we have as clients insurance companies, and we also insure big projects of big corporates. That's the core of our business, and a big part of the premium we collect are linked to insuring against natural catastrophes. Climate-related, but also not climate-related, earthquakes, for instance, or natural catastrophes that are not climate-related. But let's be clear and a little cynical. We like climate risk, because if there was no climate risk, we would not do business. What is a little puzzling is climate change, because it completely changes the way we do our business. So we are strongly concerned by physical risk, because when we say that we protect against natural catastrophes, it's really linked to physical risk. It can be extreme events, but it can be also droughts. It can be more longer-term type of events, because some insurance contracts are longer than some others. So we could consider that finally we don't care about transition risk and becoming net zero, because our risk is more about physical risk. But thinking twice, there is also kind of a circularity, a loop-back effect. If we succeed in maintaining global warming below 1.5 degrees, or whatever maximum we are able to contain it, it will protect our long-term business. If we do not succeed in the transition, it's likely that the world will heat up to 2.5, 3, 4 degrees, and it's likely that we won't be able to still provide coverage against natural catastrophes. So for this, we are trying not only to increase our positive impact through trying to close the protection gap or to reduce the protection gap or providing new type of products, and I think we'll talk about it a little later, but we are also caught by we need to become net zero in our operations, we need to become net zero in our insurance activities, and we need to become net zero on our investment portfolio. We are among the only ones to be hit by climate change on both sides of the balance sheet. Insurance activities are hit by increase in frequency and severity of natural catastrophes, and assets can be caught by stranded assets or even, again, physical risks linked to a type of property investment or that type of real assets. So we have committed to become net zero for our operations by 2030, but also on our insurance activities and investment by 2050. The big difficulty is that we are a financial service company. And our carbon footprint is directly linked to that of our investees and that of our clients. And let's be clear, it's completely out of our zone of control. So how can we do that? We need to develop what is called the theory of change, which is a combination of various actions. The first action of the theory of change is to reduce our the carbon footprint of insurance activities and investment, but not by exiting high-emitting activities, but by selecting the ones that are best in class or the ones who are in their own journey to net zero. So we have to set targets of reduction. That's what we've done on investment by 2025 and by 2030. And we started to do it last week on the insurance activity. We also have to put in place exclusions. Everything that is not compatible with a 1.5 degree has to be considered. It does not mean that we exclude everything, because we have to keep in mind that we have a sustainable mission that is to protect economic agents against natural catastrophes. So it's a trade-off. Should we continue to protect them, or should we have a longer-term horizon and decide to exclude them? And it's really big discussions, and there are arbitration through referral processes to decide who we can help and who we cannot. So this is the first pillar, the reduction of negative impact. The second one, which is the most important one in the theory of change, is engagement. We have to engage with our clients. We have to engage with our investees. We have to engage with our partners. We are so well positioned to explain what would be the consequences of a world at 4 degrees. We are climate risk experts, so we can share our knowledge with our clients. We can help them take the best decision to transition their business model. We can incentivize them in accelerating their own journey. This is the second pillar. And the third one, last but not least, is fostering the transition to a low-carbon economy. And we have 2 drivers. Investment, how do we invest in the transition? And more important, how do we support the transition through our new capabilities, new expertise? How do we insure hydrogen, for instance? It's completely brand new. Nobody knows how to do it. We have started to do it. Insurance is really based, or insuring activities is really based on observation. It's statistics. It's actuarial people trying to extract from data of various events the pricing and the modeling. We have to start modeling things that we don't really know how it works. So it's completely new from the spirit of the insurance over years, but we have started. We have also taken commitments to increase the premium we get from low carbon type of activities. It's hydrogen, it's carbon dioxide removal, but it's also grids. It's all what fosters this transition to a low carbon economy. And by combining these 3 pillars, it has really to be the combination of the 3. We expect to be in a position to contribute to reducing GHG emissions in the atmosphere and not only in our portfolio. Again, selling a security that is highly emitting and that will be bought by someone else doesn't have any impact on GHG emissions in the atmosphere. Convincing the investee to slightly, progressively, but still with determination, change the business model will have positive impact and contribute to reduce GHG emissions in the atmosphere.
Yes, to me it's very interesting what you're saying, because when you now speak about SCOR as a company, but when we kind of even look at the insurance industry as a whole, we had this discussion earlier today, risk is a big factor in making good investment decisions. And you were mentioning you have to work on new models because you don't have data, so you need to figure out something to project in the future. And I don't know if you can maybe say a few words about how you think that affects the insurance industry, but also other players who want to invest in climate solutions, or just how to get traction of risks these days.
I can share with you something that happened years ago. When we kicked off the journey on sustainability at SCOR, we are a sustainable activity. I mean, we provide services to protect against natural catastrophes, but also to help life and health. So we can say that we are sustainable by nature, but we kicked off the journey being really mindful of what we wanted to do with investments years ago, in 2016, with a French law well known by its Article 173, mandating investors to report on how they embed environmental, social, and governance criteria in their investment decisions and how they tackle climate change. So I thought I was very lucky because I was working in an insurance company, so I went and see my colleagues in the property and casualty business, the ones who were modeling natural catastrophes. And I asked them, can you please have a look to the investment portfolio and tell me more about the climate risk that we are bearing and what would be the impact of climate change? And their answer was very clear. We can tell you what the climate risk is today, but we cannot tell you what would be the climate risk in various scenarios. So my answer was, how come? You have all the models. Yes, but we only use observations. At that time, 2016, it was unbelievable for a risk modeler to use something else than banks of data, of real observed data. It has considerably shifted since then, and we are now able to upload something that we could call fake data linked to various scenarios. What would be the observations if we were in this type of pattern? And we are now able to twist the model so that we can price something that may happen in the near future. And for the insurance industry, it's completely new in terms of designing the products. One of the reasons for this is that insuring against natural catastrophes is a one-year time horizon. You renew the contract on a yearly basis. So 10 years ago, there was no need to try and have this kind of forward-looking mindset to be able to embed at early stage what may happen in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really good to understand how the climate change kind of drives the thinking in industries, and maybe because you were talking about partnerships, and we have, I know, David, you're partnering with Schneider to work, say, on energy efficiency, and maybe you can say something how collaborations help to tackle climate targets or sustainability targets more broadly, and where else you see the power of collaboration to make progress.
Yeah, I think the title of this roundtable is Co-creating Sustainability Across the Value Chain. So we cannot do anything without partnering. And like I said, we have a partnership with Schneider Electric. And before we came here, we discussed with Fabien, and Schneider for Nexans is like the brother, you know, because he's doing in advance a lot of good initiative. And we are taking Schneider Electric as a role model. Of course, we're applying our own business, the different recipes, but it's key. When it comes to industrial company working on energy monitoring, energy efficiency, optimizing industrial processes, reducing the load, the time required to produce manufacturing product, etc., is key. And you cannot do alone. If you are not going outside, if you are not leveraging what is performed outside and combining capabilities, you cannot deliver the optimum, not the best, but the optimum process. And we partner with Schneider on Industry 4.0, but I will use another example that is maybe less visible, but it impacts each site. So each of the 70 sites we had at Nexans, and that is maybe like a very minor impact as compared to what Schneider is doing with us, but at least is more visible. You know, we are using light in order to light the different plants. And a few years ago, 2 years ago, we partnered with the former Philips Lighting called Signify. And Signify helped us to use a different model. Usually, you buy the light, you put it in the plant, and you use it. No, we use a different model as energy as a service. And energy as a service illustrates perfectly the E3 model I presented in the introduction, meaning that how we can combine impact on the environment, because using LED as compared to the usual light reduce the carbon emission, GHG emission. It will optimize the cost, because energy as a service, you pay as you consume. It's like at the former IBM on-demand, services. Right. And something that was the cherry on the cake, it was that our workers in the plant, they told us that working with LED reduce, the shade area that you may have in the plant as compared to the usual light, with LED. So combining these three elements means that when we partner with Signify, it was the good opportunity at site level, and we leveraged that to 12 European plants first, and we will leverage to the 70 others, at one point of time, and combining the three elements. So, like you said, co-creating sustainability across the value chain cannot happen alone. We are not expert in lighting, we are not expert in industry optimization, we are not expert in energy efficiency. We are expert in the cable manufacturing. So that's why partnering is key to tackle all the sustainability subject and matters. And I think, and last week, and I will conclude with that on this topic, last week with the climate certificate, I mentioned to the student who asked, what will you do between 2030 and 50 to reach the net zero? One of the simple answers is that I don't have a crystal ball, and I think that the technology that will help us to fully decarbonize the 20 years after 2030 maybe does not exist, and we will partner to develop this technology.
And that's so interesting what you're saying, and I think that's exactly where you come into play, where you bring your own knowledge to the value chain with the new solutions, right?
I'll definitely echo David's point. I mean, clearly sustainability is a journey, and what's sure is that if you try to solve it alone, you won't succeed. And you need to engage your ecosystem, you need to engage your suppliers, you need to engage your complete value chain, and it starts with partnerships. And you know, fundamentally, in all humbleness, this is what we've been trying to do inside Schneider Electric, as I said earlier on, for ourselves, but also for our customers and for our partners. And so we came up with a kind of a simple framework that seems a little bit obvious, but sometimes so hard to implement. The first one is just to understand your baseline. And when we say that, going back to Michele's point, on an insurance company, understanding your overall baseline and your carbon footprint, scope 1 and 2 emissions, I imagine it's pretty simple. When it comes to scope 3 and finance emissions, you know, it can become quite a nightmare, right? And so just understanding where you stand, what's the starting point, basically, in order to decrease your carbon footprint is fundamental. And then once that is done, then it's a matter still in that, we call it strategy piece. It's a matter of understanding how you are going to achieve your decarbonization targets. And so weighting, sizing the different decarbonization levers, by the way, there are not 1,000 of them. Generally, we say energy efficiency, electrification, replacement of energy sourcing, and then, of course, engaging your overall ecosystem. But just sizing these different levers into an overall waterfall or decarbonization plan is key. And I'll echo David's point, this is where also the business model comes into question. I mean, we have some customer telling us, you know what, I don't have one CapEx to invest in energy efficiency. Though I know that I need, of course, energy efficiency to reduce my carbon footprint, and it's in all climate scenarios, it's the first lever to implement. How do I do it? Well, energy as a service, for example, is one business model that can help in striving into that direction. So fundamentally, that's more or less the first step, which is what we call the strategy piece. Once we've done that, and we know more or less the plan, if I had to oversimplify, generally the second step is understanding your baseline, but understanding your baseline in real time. And the only way to do it is to digitize, which means digitize all of your energy assets. Here we're talking about your invoices, your contracts, but all of that also in more real time coming from your meters, your sub-meters. David talked about energy monitoring. So it's all of that energy, and here I'm more focusing on scope 1 and 2, but fundamentally it's also the same thing on scope 3, what we've started also with Florence and on Chalhoub. It's to really fundamentally have a real-time understanding of your overall carbon footprint in order to do what? In order to decarbonize. So this is where generally we say strategize first, digitize second, and then decarbonize. And I'll finish on decarbonize. I'm not going to speak once again about the traditional levers across scope 1 and 2. I'll more talk about the more complex, which is obviously scope 3. And we were discussing about the importance to engage suppliers, ecosystems, and basically partners. It also is a matter of engaging with your own competitors.
Right.
And the reason why I say so is we've been helping different leaders in their different segments in their space to fundamentally help their own suppliers, which, by the way, they have in common, in order to decarbonize themselves. And it started with one program that we called Energize. So today it's 17 pharma leaders globally. You have Sanofi, Johnson & Johnson, GSK, you name it, that realized, well, you know what? We have common suppliers. How about partnering into an Energize program in order to offer solutions to our common suppliers in order maybe to benefit from optimal purchasing, energy purchasing conditions. And so this is what we've done, for example, where we've been able to support these leaders and their suppliers to create what we called courts of suppliers in order for them to aggregate their buying power, benefit from the volume effect, and source their energy, electricity, in common on the market. And therefore, you create what? You create, in a way, the snowball effect, if you want it. You create a volume effect, and that is beneficial, of course, for the suppliers themselves from a pure economical and carbon footprint reduction standpoints, but also from the leaders and their Scope 3 upstream. And so it's just one example on how, once again, partnership is so key in that overall decarbonization journey, because I insist on it, once again, nothing can be done alone.
And I think that brings us really to Florence, and you're very active in business networks. And maybe you can say something like how you think these networks help to drive change, how you can transmit knowledge, how you can meet people, engage new people in a journey.
Sure. So I'll just give some examples. So we started, as I was saying, with the United Nations Global Compact, both at the global level, but also in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So exactly what you were saying. I mean, it's networking, finding people from your industry who have the same challenge, how to solve these challenges, finding solutions. And Schneider, we met with you through UNGC, finding partners which have got competencies that we don't have, and where, you know, we would be stuck forever if we don't find a partner who can meet our needs. But it was also for them, they have some accelerator programs on various subjects of sustainability, so SDG ambition, gender parity, climate action, SMEs, human rights, etc. So it's allowing companies to have very practical workshop and tools and resources also, because they have an academy, unlimited wealth of knowledge that we can tap into to accelerate our journey. For them as well, what was interesting is that when you commit with them, you have the obligation to, and again, coming from family business, which doesn't have any obligations, I would say, in a non-regulated industry, but to commit to report on our sustainability performance through sustainability reports. So that gives a lot of sense of accountability, etc. So that was really motivating for us. On another side, not climate related, but WEP, the Women Empowerment Principle, initiative between UN Women and UNGC. Interesting organization that offers in DEI a gap analysis tools also. So this type of organization can also provide some tools to assess yourself against international benchmark. And for us locally as well, I would say being part of International Chamber of Commerce or the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, etc., allows us to first localize and speak to partners or industries locally and discuss the challenges we may have at a local level, but also to open a dialogue with the government. And that's also when we talk about renewable energy in the UAE or in the Middle East. We know that we need to push really the agenda, and having this window of opportunity of dialogue and access to the government and the public sector was really beneficial for us. So yeah, and we also created our own coalition last year with more developers, LVMH from the brand side, and ourselves to together around some environmental KPIs and to decide to work together on achieving this, these KPIs. So basically, it's to go, if I recap it, further and faster.
So I think this is, people to me play such a key role. So when we talk about co-creation, or when I think about it for myself, we need to get people on board, like at all levels. And we were discussing like business travel among us, and we can open this discussion in a moment. I just like Fabien, I don't know if you how do you get people on board at Schneider? I mean, what makes them work? Like in a very short kind of answer, how you mobilize the staff or at all levels,
I think first it's a matter of, we talked earlier on, but buy-in, right? It's making sure that everybody feels on board and feels engaged. And so speaking about that, now I don't think that's the case, but in the early 2020s, there was still a lot of education and awareness to be made. So this is why in Schneider we launched the Sustainability School, to make sure that everyone has access to substantial content around climate change, basically, and everyone that becomes more aware. So that's one. The second, I talked about, our different objectives that we have when it comes to sustainability and broader decarbonization, but that's only until 2025. 2025 is around the corner, right? So the question is, what do we do after? In all humbleness, how Schneider do we still want to be a leader in the space of decarbonization and sustainability? Well, I believe our teams, respectively, have great ideas that they can propose in order to make sure that maybe tomorrow, and we're still reflecting on it, our new ESG barometer takes these inputs into consideration. And how we frame our journey for 2030, for example, we will need to make sure that we take the idea, the inputs into account. And the third, maybe how to make sure that everyone is on board is around financials. Today, everyone in Schneider that has a variable component in their salary, this variable component is linked by 30% to our ESG achievements. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I'm saying this is an incentive also to incentivize basically people to thrive into one single directions. So if I had to summarize, story short, education, of course, transparency, communication, and buy-in.
I think the financials, I don't know what's happened. The financials are one element, but then David, you were saying, like in your E3 model, but also you were saying like you partner your employees with clients, so they have a relationship, and how does that kind of change the way it works?
I think Fabien said it all. In education, awareness, incentivized, of course. But I would take one example regarding the client. Remember in the introduction, I mentioned that Nexans came from 2018 with 8 billion, and in 23, same revenue, but double the profitability. And the reason for that is that we reduce our customer by more than 2, meaning that we started from 17,000 client to less than 5,000 today. The reason is not to sell less, but to sell the best. And it's important because when you start to partner, and we come back to the partnership, it comes to the eco-design of our product, the way we want to sell the cable for the future. When you install cable, it's not like when you are buying like just bread. You install the cable for 10 to 40 years. So it's key to have the client and so the employee fully engaged. And having said that, meaning that when you're on site and you're producing cable, if you're producing cable for 1,000 clients that are different, you don't know for which client you are producing the cable. But when you divide by more than 2 and you are doing this lens for this client, when you organize the industrial day or client day on your site, you know exactly who is the client you produce the cable. And it's key because this is where, when we are talking about E3 model, it's funny because initially, when you start to push such kind of punchline like E3 model, this is business operating model, it sounds like a corporate message, but it's not in fact. And one of the key reasons is that if you don't empower people to act local for local, you will never succeed. I will not come back to the incentivized, etc., but it's true. In fact, there is a portion of that that is mandatory. It's part of the game. But having relationship with client for people on site, what we call the blue collar, I don't like this expression, but the blue collar, the people that are operating on the production line, it's key because they know each other. They know that when they are doing lengths for, I don't know, 10 kilometers, 100 kilometers, etc., and for high voltage is even bigger, it's key to know exactly who is your client, and for the client, who are the people that are producing your cable. When it comes to produce a high voltage cable, it can take more than 6 months. So you can imagine that 6 months when people, they are combining copper, PVC, polymer, insulate the cable, etc. So it's key to engage the client, and in the meantime, our employee like that. And this is the way we are doing it.
I think it's also a nice idea how you see when you combine environmental, how you can have social impact at the same time. And Michele, we were talking about you have like more new damage compensation models, like where you also have a social impact, kind of combining the environment, the social. Maybe you can say something about how you help people.
Yeah, I think there are two important messages. The first one is that the insurance business is at a turning point. When I joined the industry 16 years ago, increasing resilience of the world was really about increasing financial capabilities. The more capital we had, the more we were able to provide insurance products and to hedge against natural catastrophes. Given the increase in magnitude, in severity, but also in the cost of extreme events. And why do I say also the cost of extreme events? Because it's a combination of 3 factors. More natural catastrophes, more severity of the natural catastrophes per se, but also aggregation of people in big cities, which increases dramatically the cost of the damage. So we have to face these 3 dimensions. And again, it used to be about finding capital to be able to provide coverage. It's becoming more and more increasing the resilience of the world, but pre-event. How can we incentivize people to take part of their own resilience? How do we incentivize people building more resilient houses? How do we incentivize companies adopting more resilient and sustainable behavior so that at the end of the game, the cost of the event is lower? And it's a win-win strategy because it costs less to us, but it's also less damage for the ones who are victims of this natural catastrophe. So we have to make it more, to increase these capabilities that we have to increase the resilience of the world by making sure that more and more people take care of their own resilience, and we support their journey. We are still there with financial capabilities, but we make sure that all in all, the cost of the damage is lower because they have taken part of the responsibility ahead of the damage. This is one message. The second one is, of course, we have to build new products. And we have already started years ago to use parametric type of insurance contract. So for those who are not familiar, I will try to make it very short and easy to understand. When you have a damage, you contact your insurance company. There is an expertise. It takes ages before all the parties agrees on the amount that has to be paid by the insurance company, and finally the payment comes. When I joined SCOR in 2008, we still had not paid for the World Trade Center. It has taken 10 years before the payment has occurred. So we are talking about very big amounts, but it's the same for small amount. It does not take 10 years, but it takes too much for a small farmer, for a fisher to get the money after a disaster. So we have designed new type of products which are parametric insurance products. Parametric insurance products are based on parameter. So you choose several parameters. What is the geographical area that is covered? What is, for instance, the pressure? Let's say below 900 bars, there will be indemnification. Above, there will be no indemnification. And you have a lot of parameters that you agree with your clients. Once there is the damage, you check. If the parameters are hit, the indemnification can be paid the day after. And for the most vulnerable people, it's really a way for them to get the money early enough to be able to rebuild their business. So there is also this social dimension, but it's by essence the role of the insurance company to work for the resilience of the societies. Our raison d'être is combining the art and science of risk to protect societies. So it's really part of our own business.
So with that, we can go back one more time to think about how can we engage people. And my last question is for Florence. I mean, do you see cultural differences, like working out of the Middle East, when you look at Europe? Is there something where cultural differences matter in say, engaging, whether it's clients or employees?
Yeah, thank you. So specifically for our group, as I was saying, I mean, we have 110 nationalities, so it's a good representation of the world. But yes, there is, I would add to whatever has been said, the tone of the top, making sure the leadership is involved and showing the way, allocating the right resources to it is extremely important in our region. Education, I would say we are not reaching this stage where, everyone has got the level of education and awareness and access even to the tools or the resources. So we're spending a lot of time bringing the academic training. So for us, we have a Chalhoub University. So it's a platform, online platform where we develop some sustainability training. But I would say the education level and the awareness level is not on par, I would say. And then the best way we found to engage our employees to really like physical engagement. So initiatives where they can learn and experience and feel how it is. So for us, we organize more than 250 initiatives in the 8 countries we operate in, but we found it quite effective. And then I would agree on the KPIs. I mean, that's something we've been fighting for a long time. For the first year, this in 2024, our ExCom has got some KPIs on ESG, which is a major win for us. And of course, these KPIs have been translated to the business unit, but it's not. We're not at that stage where it's linked for everyone to bonuses. But we found that, it's a very effective way to make things progress.
Well, so with that in mind, I don't know, so Igor is walking around with the microphone here, so I don't know if you have any questions for one of our panelists or maybe for them collectively to answer.
Yeah, so thank you all for the very interesting speeches. Pascal Ronfard from One Health Expertise. So I have actually 2 questions. So the first one, you were talking about your strategy to offset your carbon footprint. I understood the way you would do it, but will you use carbon compensation markets or not? And in that line, and one step further, will you try to buy the carbon rights within your value chain? So if I understand correctly, I'm new with all that, but that would be insetting against offsetting, and would you see advantages on this? So 2 questions.
The question is for Nexans or Schneider or SCOR or... Well, in fact, in terms of strategy, the first pillar and the main strategy is to reduce carbon footprint, because if we are all playing with compensation, we'll never succeed. We can do whatever we want, it will be a financial compensation in any case. So at Nexans, what we are doing is that as much as we can, our strategy, and with like a midterm, like 2030, we are moving with this V3 model on a playbook and a toolbox that help each single site to reduce significantly their carbon footprint without thinking about compensating. Because the idea is to really structurally move to the reduction. We discussed before the panel here that at one point of time, some industry will have a disadvantage to decarbonize their industry. I don't know if Nexans is part of it or not, but we are pushing hard to reduce this carbon footprint. And like SBTI is allowing in the end by 2050 for the net zero commitment that we took, if we have to compensate the maximum of the 10% that we'll have, we will see how we will do it because, and it's important to keep in mind, it will cost a fortune to just compensate the remaining 10%. And I don't know if company, specifically listed company, are ready to take this financial compensation in their profitability. I don't have the answer yet, but what I can tell you is that in 2050, if you want to compensate the remaining part of the carbon trajectory, it will cost a significant amount of cash.
Clearly, the strategy at Schneider is to follow the SBTI guidance, though I don't know, we can have a debate afterwards, but there has been a lot of back and forth quite recently on the usage of offsets when it comes to Scope 3. So nevertheless, today our strategy is pretty simple, is that we will compensate the so-called residual emissions, okay, and with high credible offsets in regards to nature-based, for example, or technologies. So really focusing on sequestration of offsets. That's our strategy, I would call it more on 2030. And then afterwards, back to David's points, I think that it's a matter of either you want to call it compensation or contribution more. It's just beyond your overall value chain. What is your overall policy in terms of climate contribution and no longer compensation? So the emissions that I emit, that's a fact. That's something that will stay. But inevitably, independent of that, what do I do as a business to contribute positively to the climate? That's in Schneider how we are handling this topic of complexity in regards to offsets.
Hello, I'm Christian and I'm a student in strategy. So I have a question. I was very struck by Michele's account of how climate change has a huge impact in risk. And I was wondering, beyond working towards net zero, how do companies take into account the climate risks that are more dire every day? And how is that financed right now?
Sure. No, go ahead, Michele. I think go ahead. You're talking about risk. So.
Thanks for your question, which is it's quite complex. As of today, what we see from companies is that it's not absolutely sure that they have all taken into account the materiality of the climate risk, of the physical climate risk that is at stake. And that's our role. When we say that we engage with our clients, it's also one of our duty to make them understand, and we use our capabilities in understanding climate risk to explain how material it can become and how affordability and insurability can become at stake. We cannot change the business model of companies, but what we are offering is risk transfer. The core of the business of an insurance company, and especially a reinsurance company, is to offer risk transfer. If they don't want to take the risk, we have solutions so that we take the risk on their behalf. So it's up to them to decide to hedge their position, but it's up to us to make sure that they have understood how far the risk can go and how their business model can be at stake.
And if I may add something on the risk, it is something that we have to keep in mind that in terms of mindset, we have to anticipate even if we don't know what will happen, as much as possible. I will take one example. We have refurbished a plant for high voltage in the United States in an area where there is a lot of storm, flooding, etc. We could have just duplicate what we have in Norway, the same plant, in the South Carolina. But what we did is that by design, we have built up and refurbished the plant with a tower that helps us to align the cable and the copper in the cable for the high voltage in a rounded way rather than square, in order to have like the wind not going in front of the square tower. And so rather in the rounded stuff. And we hired the level of the floor, the ground floor, in order to mitigate this flooding risk. So what I'm saying here is that the risk zero does not exist. I can guarantee you, zero risk does not exist. But this is our call as a company, with the ecosystem, with the partner, with all the experts, the climate expert, etc., to think in advance when there is a greenfield refurbishment, to think about the potential risk and the likelihood in order to construct by design and mitigate this risk.
Let's be clear. At some point in time, the reinsurance industry or the insurance industry will not be able to compensate for the risks. And this is something that has to be clearly understood. All the insurance activity is based on hazard, meaning it has to be a hazard. If the probability of the plant to be destroyed is 100%, the cost of the coverage is the cost of the plant. So the insurance industry will not save all the actors, and that's why it's so important to have all actors being responsible for their own resilience. We have been able over the past years to change a lot of industrial contracts that were thought build back the same to something which is now build back better. So after a disaster, there is an opportunity to rebuild with more resilience, which is a progress. It sounds so obvious that it should be done like that. It was not the previous covenants of the contract. So now we can build back better. But again, if the probability that the house is destroyed every year, then the cost of the insurance is the cost of the house, and nobody can afford it.
Good afternoon, Jean Verlet here. I work in consulting. Thank you very much for this roundtable. I have one question for Nexans and Schneider. You mentioned the fact that the shift, the transition requires a high level of collaboration all across the economy, with your upstream, with your providers, and downstream with the distributors. We all have in mind that the tradition in any industry was more focused on business confidentiality vis-à-vis your competitors or your distributors. So with this shift and this transition and this collaboration required, how would you assess the level of alignment with your competitors and with your distributors? We know that you have very important distributors in the industry, such as Sonepar, Excel, or Wesco. How is this going? Is this peaceful, or did you have still room for improvement?
It's a kind of gentleman agreement. I'm not saying that it's peaceful or not. It's like healthy competition. What I'm saying is that when we talk about circularity, for example, at Nexans, we have a partnership with Suez for the circularity with Recycable. We have a JV since 2008, where we try to increase as much as possible the recycled content in our product. When I'm saying that we try to partner, I'm not saying like it's a kind of bisounours world. I will not partner with Prysmian, NKT, or some other competitor. What I'm saying is that we have all experience and capabilities in a piece of this entire circularity. For example, RATP, RTE, they have aluminum, copper in their cable that they have to change. Suez, Veolia, de Richebourg, they have the capabilities, knowledge, and experience in order to how to recycle, how to separate the polymer, the plastics, the copper, etc. We have the capabilities because we have the facility of metallurgy to transform the recycled copper. So when I'm saying we have to partner is that we have a client, we have a partner that brings technology. It's good to partner in such way. It does not mean that I will sit down with Prysmian, with NKT, and try to share all the confidentiality you just mentioned. Of course, we remain competitors, definitely. But what we have to do is that if we are talking about only just high voltage, there is only 3 companies in the world that have capability to install the grid, subsea grid, in order to interconnect continent. If we want to succeed with energy transition, there's 3 competitors, NKT, Prysmian, and Nexans. We will have just to be smart enough to build up this ecosystem in order to avoid that the fast competition that definitely will be detrimental to any one of us.
And I would argue the fact that, being cautious and being careful in the level of information that you will share with a competitor is absolutely normal. I mean, we would all have the same reaction, right? And coming back to my example on Energize with all of the pharma leaders, that's exactly the behavior that they had at the early beginning. However, when you start to demonstrate, and it's a little journey, on the benefits of engaging together with common suppliers, on the benefit that these suppliers will have, but also for yourself, then generally what happens is that the entry barriers from a confidentiality standpoint tends to drop, tends to break down. And that's essentially what happens. So, story short, I would argue the fact that, of course, it's pretty natural to be cautious, but on specific aspects of the business, in regards to that example on Scope 3 emissions, it becomes quite natural to collaborate.
So I think we have time for one last question. And please go ahead.
Hello, this is Yijun from Executive MBA at HEC. I'm from automotive industry, so I have one specific question for Schneider Electric. As I'm working on the circular economy for the electronic device, I would like to know as Schneider has the majority of the products is electronic device, what do you plan to do about it regarding the circular economy? I'm not referring to just refurbish, but more do you plan to enter like remanufacture, reindustrialization? Do you expect it to be profitable business, or do you currently no visibility, or even non-profitable you are going, or what's your vision on this domain, please? Thank you.
Not only we believe it's profitable, but it's more than necessary, and in fact, it is crucial to be more and more circular and to have more and more circular business models. So fundamentally in Schneider Electric, we believe that circularity starts with design up front, and all of the equipments and different products that we're going to make. It starts with having an eco-design mentality and mindsets. Therefore, it's everything around products being repairable. It's everything around products being recyclable. It's everything related to sustainable longevity. And so we have, since 2015, make sure that all of our products in the design phase are really thought from a eco-design standpoint. So yes, we are striving in that direction for sure. It's a business model when we talk about circularity that is becoming more and more popular. And fundamentally, we are convinced inside Schneider Electric that it's the future. It's the future because today, if you think about it, overall, 45% of the emissions are related to products, okay? 45% related to products. So inevitably, circularity comes into play.
So thank you so much. I think this is going to wrap up this panel. I just want to say big thanks to all of you. It's been fantastic to have you on board for this journey, to share your insights, your expertise. I hope you can benefit from it for your own journey and to make an impact, because we need it for the planet and humanity. And I really thank you big time for being here with us today. Thank you.